beautiful and tragic story about two people finding love, meaning, and hope in a system that's deliberately designed against them. I'm sorry, it's not really that funny of an intro. Here's a fart noise. Alright guys, I know it's a bit of a different format change. I don't know, this is probably going to be permanent. This is just for today thing because I'm really behind and I saw a couple movies the past couple weeks that I just haven't got around to talking about because I'm the only one that's seen them and I was trying to get someone else to talk about them with, but it just hasn't worked out. And so for the sake of trying to get these done before the movie rush of December and January comes in, I'm just going to do these solo. So I figured I'd start with the one I saw most recently, which is Queen and Slim, which is a movie that came out a couple weeks ago. I don't know the director or the actors, unfortunately, but I do have my phone here, so I'm probably going to look that as we go along. Now, any story, any movie or story that kind of takes on this topic, I have to give this disclaimer. This movie tackles a lot of topics and a lot of issues that I personally, being whiter than white bread, cannot really fully understand and comprehend in the context in which it is designed to. So let me disclaimer. Everything I talk about in this video and systems I feel obligated to talk about because of that, and stuff I feel very passionate about that I want to discuss, are told through a lens of a white man, and therefore carries some grain of ignorance. So if I say anything that is misinformed or just plain wrong, I encourage you to please let me know in the comments, because it is a topic I'm genuinely working hard to understand the best of my abilities, even though I know fully well that I'm never going to understand completely. So with that being said, this is Queen and Slim. I'm making this way more complicated than it needs to be. I saw this, I want to say, back on Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday I saw this, and it really hit me in ways that I wasn't quite expecting, especially for a movie like this. And it did some things that a lot of movies like this, it did some things that movies like this don't usually do, in a way I felt like really resonated. I felt it was really, really powerful. And I can't really go in that without talking about spoilers, so I'm going to go briefly over this, spoiler-free as possible, but I will say that if you have not seen this movie yet, and you can find it still playing in theaters close to where you are, I highly recommend you see it. It's a powerful film, it's an emotional film, it knows what it wants to say, it knows how to say it, and there's a lot of layers there, a lot of important layers that I feel like it really hits strongly. So yeah, I think it's one of the best films of the year. Go see it. So with that being said, brief run-up of the story. This movie is basically about two African-American people who are... It opens with them being on a Tinder date. And right off the bat, you kind of get their personality. There is... Okay, I'm going to learn their names because it's going to be really bad if I just call them, like, man and woman for the entire fucking thing. Or Queen and Slim, which I feel like is more insulting. Okay. Yeah, so it involves these two people that are going on a Tinder date. That was initiated by the woman whose name is... Give me something here. Oh, I guess she's just called Queen. I guess they don't say their names now that I think about it, huh? Or is her name just Queen? Either way, she's labeled as Queen on here, so I'm just going to go with that. So, a Queen initiates a Tinder date with Slim. Slim is clearly like the easygoing guy. He just kind of goes to the flow. He doesn't like to make a fuss. Queen is like type A to a fault. She's kind of just nitpicks everything and kind of makes everything a big deal. Like I think point she gets on him for chewing too loudly. That kind of a person. And then they go on the date and it goes like it's going so. But they kind of understand each other on a kind of weirdly emotional level. Like there's a deeper connection there. Neither one of them really understand at the time until he's driving her home from the date, and suddenly in the middle of that, Slim accidentally swerves a bit, and he's pulled over by a white cop. And the white cop like this is where things kind of turn. If you see the trailer, you kind of know what happens here. So I'm not really giving anything away with this. What basically happens is, and the way this plays out is very naturally, like almost disturbingly so. Like again, this goes into category things I cannot say with any real authority. There are some things about that this movie tackles, I feel like I can talk about with more authority, so I'm going to later on. But for the sake of saying, I can only assume that when cases like this one pop up, where it's a white cop who he suspects of doing DUI, and it starts out very civil, very respectful. Everyone is very upfront, although Queen is kind of giving him a little sass. And then he goes back to his vehicle and says, "I suspect him of DUI," and he's like, "No, I don't need backup." And then he goes back, and that's when things start going sideways. Because then he says, get out of the car, and Queen, who is a lawyer, is like, "No, don't do that. You're under no obligation. You've done nothing wrong." And Slim is just like, "It's okay. Well, I'm just going to do what he says, and we're just going to get this done. It's fine." And he gets that. So Slim goes out of the car, and the cop starts kind of like looking for reasons to arrest him. And this is something I know happens because I've talked with people who this has happened to. So the way this kind of developed is very, very, to me, it felt very, very organic. But again, I can't speak for that for people who've actually gone through this. I only know from secondhand information. But he says what's in the trunk, and he says just shoeboxes, and he's like, "Mind if I take a look?" And so he consents to the search, and he does, and he starts looking through all the boxes. And he's like he's basically just looking for anything that might resemble drugs that he can arrest him for, even though he's only suspected for DUI. But now it's suddenly turned to a drug search, and obviously Queen notices his bullshit. She gets out of the car. No. First off, the cop is searching for this. Slim is cold because it's the middle of fucking winter. And he just like, "Can you hurry up because it's cold outside?" The cop blows up on him, starts freaking out, starts doing his chest puff alpha male bullshit. Queen sees escalating. She goes out of the car. She starts throwing legalese at him. The cop gets more and more angry. Everyone's basically yelling at each other. But to be clear, at this point, Queen is doing nothing wrong. At this point, she realizes where this is going and where it ends up eventually going. At which case, the cop pulls a gun on Slim. The cop pulls a gun on Slim, and then she gets out of the car. That's what it is. And the cop accidentally shoots Queen, which causes Slim to attack the cop, and there's a little scuffle, and the cop ends up getting killed. At that point, they both pretty much immediately realize they're fucked, and they run for it. They drop everything. They don't say goodbye. They just leave. And the rest of the movie is basically them trying to survive their way across country and trying to get to Florida, where they're hoping they could take a plane to fly over to Cuba. Whether or not they succeed in that is kind of the whole point of the story. I mean, you kind of know how this story is inevitably gonna end. And that's the most I'll say without giving away spoilers. But I think if you kind of know anything about how, and this goes back into just the hardships of reality, you kind of just know how a story like this is gonna end. As much as you don't want it to end that way. So this is where I'm going to talk about spoilers, because I think this is going to be a relatively short video, because I do kind of know what I want to say with this. Because this is where I got to talk about the themes, I got to talk about in my opinion, the main point of the film, or what it's trying to say, what the text and subtext is saying. So yeah, from this point on, it's spoiler free. You've been fairly warned. So really, again, this is my personal opinion. I can only say so much about this. I'm sure I know it has a lot more to say about living in the black community and the relationship to law enforcement and all that. And there's a lot of complicated elements to this that I can't understand. But what I can talk about is the system it's obviously critiquing. And that's the part I thought really, really worked really well. And because this is where I gotta call myself out on some bullshit in the past too. Because this is where it gets a little weirdly personal, is I've been taking a hard look at my own attempt at centrism over the past few years and the flaws of that mentality. And yeah, this will loop back around. And I'm mostly looking back at my Green Book review, where I gave it a surprising pass because it did kind of take the centrist angle. And looking back at it, I do regret a lot of what I said in that review. Not that it was all really awful, but I think it was, looking back, I think it was naively optimistic, I think. And I've, thank God, listened to other people that are smarter than me, that know about more of the stuff than I do. That has been very educational for me. But the one thing I've realized in movies like Green Book and movies that try to present racism in America as just a few bad eggs. And as you see that especially with law enforcement. I bring Green Book as an example because Green Book is pretty, or even like I would argue Detroit did this too. And I think that was my issue. No, my issue with Detroit, I think, kind of grew from my desire to see centrism, because here's something I realized about trying to be a centrist is you have to assume, in order for that viewpoint to maintain, for that viewpoint to be valid, you have to assume there's an equivalent on the other side. You have to assume both sides are equal in some kind of a sense, and the problem, there's some equal good to some equal bad. And unfortunately, and this time I've really had to look hard at and realize is that's not really the case. You see, especially now you look in the political climate and that's why when they're like, oh, there's a far right. Well, if you assume there's a far right and you're trying to be a centrist, you must also assume there's a far left. But even a far left, by the most loosest of terms, does not even remotely compare to the actions of the far right, and that is not held by statistics. It's not held by the data. The far left, as a concept, does not exist in the way that people who want to maintain a centrist viewpoint want to believe. So, easy example. People say, like, far-right Nazis, but what about Antifa? Is a common one you see a lot. Even though, even if you take apart all the crimes of Antifa and the actual stuff they've done, not stuff that's been falsely attributed to them, there's not even close to an equivalence. It's not even close. Not saying, like, Antifa's all, like, free and clear, but, again, there's no comparison. Like, they've never thrown, like, hate marches, so... they've thrown counter protests, but that's not the same as like hate marches. Yeah, not even close. And so yeah, and I think I gave Green Book a pass because it did do that. It did show like a few cartoonishly racist people. But then it also showed the good cops that weren't racist, so that made it okay. It wasn't the police system that was racist, it was just those few cops. And I'm realizing again that like that's not really true. Well, I'm not going to go in the all cops are bad territory, or there aren't good cops in the system. And there are good legitimate cops in the police force. That being said, the problem isn't a few bad eggs. The problem isn't the individual cop. The problem is inherent in the system. The system is where the problem lies. The system is deliberately designed to be the way it is. It's designed to be racist. It's designed to promote bigotry and discrimination because it's been embedded in the system practically since its inception. And it's one of those cases, how many times do we have to read the same story over and over and over again about innocent people getting shot and killed, innocent black people getting shot and killed, before we have to admit to ourselves that the problem exists in the system? And that's what this movie does. It doesn't paint the image of like, oh, it's just a few racist cops. Oh, it wasn't like this one cop was racist. It's that the system is racist. The system is designed to work against them. And they demonstrate that through the entire movie. In fact, the movie very much equates multiple times, like directly compares the police system and the jail system to modern day slavery. And the more you do the research, the more this viewpoint is actively supported. They directly call cops at one point, what's the term? Slave hunters or slave runners. I don't know what the proper terminology is. Basically, people that would hunt down escaped slaves to bring them back and then force them back into slavery. They show that with the manhunt that goes on against these two people, that they massive overkill, like especially towards the end, it goes like in Blues Brothers territory with how many cops and like helicopters, all these things that are chasing just for two people that when they do finally catch up with them are not armed, and again, that's just the way the system is designed. And not just the police system, but how we receive the police force system. Because it all shows how the media is reporting that. And it's reporting them as... It does what they always do. It reports the cops as these kind of like misunderstood figures. They basically present it like it's the cops are all in the right, and the people that are being victimized are in the wrong. And that's, again, that's just inherent in the system. That doesn't mean the people involved in it are necessarily bad, but it's in a broken system. And I can make a drinking game 10 times I'm saying the word system, but again, it is really important to emphasize that, because the thing about, and especially white people, let's be honest, white people want to believe that the system we have in place is good. We want to believe that it's beyond bias. We want to believe it's beyond discrimination. But the fact is, it's not. And we have to acknowledge that at some point if we have any chance of actually fixing it. In fact, I just watched Watchmen, and Watchmen made it, like, I watched the finale while Watchmen without giving anything away. It made a great point about that. It blew my mind. It was fucking brilliant. But again, the way it portrays how that system is broken and how it affects people and how it's hurting people, innocent people, is kind of amazing. And it really hits home, and you do feel the pain, you feel the struggle of these two people who were legitimately basically marked for death before Slim actually tried to take the gun from the cop. And then they still ended up dying anyway. And then the news reports said that they were armed and dangerous, when really Slim was just holding the body of the dead queen before the police opened fire on him, because he wouldn't stop walking towards them, even though he had no way of being a threat. And the news reports, they believe otherwise, because then again, that goes into bias, our own personal biases. We want to believe that if police officers shoot somebody down, there was justifiable cause, because that's the way the system is supposed to work. Now, there are obvious, like, actual racist people that are glad that policemen shoot black people down. But a lot of other people who support it are just kind of working in ignorance and supporting confirmation bias, believing what's being told because it supports what we want to believe about it. I hope I'm making sense. This is actually one of the most weirdly cohesive reviews about a topic like this I feel like I've done in a while. But yeah, and again, I do feel very, very strongly about this. So, and I do feel the way this movie portrays it in a way where you can't use the portrayal of the cops or anyone involved in these attacks in an overly cartoonish way. It portrays it as reality, which means you can't just say, oh, that's not the way it is. That's just like, they made that guy really cartoonishly evil. This therefore doesn't reflect reality. It doesn't give you that scapegoat. It does force you to look at it. It does force you to look at it in realistic terms. Even at the end when Queen is shot by the black cop, they obviously make it look like the woman it was an accidental misfire, but no one disputed it. Nobody, like, she didn't get any trouble for it. She just did it, accident or otherwise. That's the way the training sets you up to view other people. And again, if you actually look into how policemen are trained, it is very much portrayed as us versus them. And it's been portrayed that for a very, very long time. And that's what causes, well, that's not the sole cause, but it is a big reason why so much of that shit is happening. And again, I'm only speaking from what I know. If I am wrong or off base, please let me know. Not by racists. I should point out, if you're just trying to throw out like racist propaganda, I'm not gonna put up with you. But in my opinion, it's a lot of the training. It's a lot of the fact that we don't want to confront these issues because then we have to admit the system is broken. And I love this movie dared you to really look at it and say it is broken. What are you gonna do about it? And that goes into the other side. Like, the only time a cop is portrayed in a positive light is when it's a black cop. Which I think is very, very interesting, especially the way these black cops are portrayed. Because there's like 2 or 3 instances where black cop comes into play, and they end up helping some. They try to talk to, talk down the people that they're confronting. Like one case is when Queen and Slim have their car broke down, like the radiator goes die. So they go to an auto shop, and they talk with this kid. I think they just call him Junior. And the kid talks about how Queen Slim kind of become these folk heroes since all this. Showing like people are kind of like standing up and fighting back, and how it's kind of like hopeful for them. And the Queen Summer, obviously, like, we don't want that. That's not at all why we did what we did. We just did what we did to survive. But the kid kind of takes it like, I kind of just want to have a legacy. I want to be remembered. And so he just basically kind of, it's almost, he's kind of just saying, like, I kind of want a cop to shoot me so I can kind of go down at like, so my name can be led in marches and chants and stuff like that. Now, I can't speak for that in the black community because I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to comment on that. But what I did think was interesting is when they actually show later on, like after Queen Slim leave, there's a protest that happens in that town that's being blocked off by cops, and Junior starts picking a fight with one of the cops, and the cop happens to be black, and he takes off his mask and basically just pleads with the kid to go home. It's almost conveyed like he knows what he's trying to do, and he's like, just go home, please go home. And the way it portrays it to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, because this is where I have to admit ignorance. It portrays like he's very aware of where the job he has and what it entails and the broken pieces of it, and I feel like he's trying to do better by it, but he's also still trapped by it as well. And then of course that situation ends badly, despite his best efforts, and the cycle continues. Likewise later on, when this is like the only time like I feel like there's like two token white helpful people that pop in this movie, which fine, they're not there for long. But yeah, so long story short, Queen Slim finds herself these two people who one was in the army, and the other one was just his wife. And they help him out, and the police find out where they are, and they raid him, but they don't find anything, and the white couple doesn't rat them out. And they get out the next day, and they try to get a car started. Meanwhile, the police are surrounding the house. The only one that kind of figures out where they are is one black police officer on Forrest, who is being kind of berated by his white cohort. So he goes in there and he finds them, but then he kind of looks at him, questions whether or not he's going to bring them in, but he ends up letting them go. And I got the same vibe from that. That's the vibe I felt like they were going for. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. Is definitely the case of he knows what was done to them was wrong, and he knows that he is part of something that is deliberately designed to keep them down. That is deliberately designed to discriminate against them. And he was just trying to do the best he can within the system that he was, I guess, trying to change from the inside. And yeah, I think all that stuff is very powerful. And on top, and even with all of that, what you do have is a beautiful story about two people who do find love and connection and meaning and joy in what they both kind of know is their last journey, like their last adventure. Like they both kind of know they're not going to make it out of this alive, even though they hope they do. They're fighting for it, but they both kind of know our time is numbered easily. And the movie does a great way of showing that the desperation, but the beauty that can be found from that desperation. Overall, I think this is a beautiful film. It's wonderfully acted. It portrays its subject matter with a lot of strength, and poignancy. Like, this movie that sat with me well after I walked out of the theater, and it sits very strongly with me now. So I'm sorry this isn't a very funny review, and I apologize if I said anything that was inaccurate or accidentally offensive, because again, I can only speak this from my perspective, and I encourage anyone who does know more about this than I do to please educate me in the comments, except for actual racists, or really people that are ignorant enough to say, no, the system's not broken, it works exactly as designed to. It's like, well, it only works well as designed if you are racist. So, I think it's a movie that's well worth your time. It is a movie that I think tackled this subject smarter than most movies like it. That I've seen recently, I should say. I'm sure there's other movies I've tackled it that I just haven't seen. But yeah, this one's well worth your time. So I think it's all I really have to say about that. At least the stuff I feel comfortable talking about. I'm sure there's other layers you can dissect out of this, but that is what I feel most comfortable talking about to the extent I can talk about it with. So, Queen Slim. It's a really good movie. You should go watch it. It's a thinker. So, yeah, that's all I got for that one. And I'm going to talk about Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood in just a little bit. So stay tuned. All right, take care, guys.